Welcome to the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning here at Coahoma Community College. I am Dr. Ouida McAfee, and I am your host. And today we have with us Dr. Carl Moore, and we will be talking about positivity at HBCUs. Welcome, Dr. Moore.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and happy Friday to you.
Same to you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, I am a people say servant a lot, right? So I'm going to use something different. I am I guess I would consider myself. I'm committed to shedding light, spreading light. For those that are okay with it, like that's like to me that's like love energy in a very the most kind of general sense. So I think I've been put on this earth to do that, and I do it through the work of primarily professional development, known as educational development or faculty development. We're working with specific groups through learning science in terms of developing learning experiences for learners to be able to not only have competencies, right? Enhance skills, competencies, outcomes, objectives, or what have you, reach those, but more so to transform whether it's a mental or paradigm shift or expansion or heart shift, right? Because I've been really fortunate to been able to do that work, whether in a classroom, teacher, working with teachers, or outside of the classroom, working with students or working with doing intergroup dialogues or working that way. So higher ed has been my happy place, but now I'm working for a digital ed tech company, Propel, which I join you from, and that's how we know each other because of the awesome opportunity we have to work across HBCUs and partnering with or collaborating with rather with Apple and other companies. So thanks for having me. There's so much more. I have little people. I have 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, so I love that. I'm a recovering workaholic, so self-care is my hobby now to balance that out. So those are just a few things. I could say much more, but I guess I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I love Propel, and I'm just thankful to be a part of the opportunity through the HBCU Faculty Fellow Academy program. So how would you define positivity?
This is it's interesting because I was going to look up a definition ahead of time, but I said no. I've read so much, I've lived so much. So I'm going to I download the information from the source right now to give it to you. So how I would describe positivity would be when faced with stimuli, whether it be a situation, a problem, an encounter, whatever, a person's uh, propensity or ability or the demonstration of, not the propensity, the demonstration of looking at that as some type of opportunity, right? Or being solutions oriented, right? Or the being able to, they say cup half full. There's still a cup. It's still there. And that's important because sometimes people think positivity and they automatically go to a loss of grip on reality or whatever, right? Sometimes like, oh, we can't be positive right now. And I'm like, no, being positive actually can help. You have to see the thing. We want reality, but being positive is about, I have this cup. Is it just half empty or half full? Or can I use it and hold it up to the light to shine sunlight through? It's about possibility of what can come next. And that would be kind of my definition. I know there's like a more psychological definition, but that's kind of how I would describe that.
Awesome. Possibility of what could come next. So what does that look like in an HBCU setting?
And an HBCU setting is I used to work when I was working at the University of the District of Columbia, and I was there for almost a decade. I started off as a department chair, and I was in Learning Resource Division, which is kind of like, the libraries there and our faculty development unit or whatever is there. And then I transitioned to the provost office, and I was an interim for about 1.5 years or so. Um, Most of my time I spent in the Center for the Advancement of Learning, which I developed the Center for Teaching and Learning kind of there, and was in that. And what possibility, and the question is, what does possibility or positivity look like there, right?
Yes.
What it looked like is I love this question because at an HBCU, you can do things and you have opportunities to do things and to innovate in ways that you don't have anywhere else. because innovation from necessity is pretty powerful. And I used to say to people, I say, if we're driving down the road, when they say, hey, do you like working there? I say, if we're driving down the road, you have this place, this civilization that's totally erect in there, and everything's going, and you have this other one. Where's there more opportunity? And they're like, well, in the one where, yeah, there isn't, because there was much that, so from the lack that we actually have, and not all HBCUs are in lack, right? It's not no stereotypical, but because being under-resourced, as many of our HBCUs are, and from the legacy in which we actually have in the world globally, sister structural kind of, racism, et cetera, and with systematic inequalities in schools, we have it where our institution necessitated innovation. So you already have all these brilliant minds and brilliant students, which if we were all green would be the same. But you have, so what I've seen positivity look like, it looked like amazing, amazing, audacious innovation. I'm borrowing that audacious innovation word from Dr. Whitaker, Senior Vice President for Innovation and Design at Propel. But it looked like that stuff you would never think about, because that's something that sometimes having resources doesn't give you. It doesn't give you the opportunity to think outside the box. So a lot of out of the box thinking and a great deal of innovation that came from the necessity.
Okay, so what are some examples specifically for administrators?
Yeah, so administrators, I think it starts with the possibility of what's next, right? So if I'm an administrator, I am a leader regardless of what role I'm in, right? Now, there are some administrators that may have leadership responsibility over, and I know we can split it even more. We're looking at administrators or staff, right? So if we lump those folks all in, we would say everyone has leadership, and the person that they're leading the most is themselves, right? It gives you amazing opportunities for your 10,000 hours at kind of self-management, right? Because when you're going through, whether it be the politics or you're going through the stuff that doesn't feel as great or whatever, the stimuli rather, and your response. So it gives opportunity. I used to tell people, I'm like, I'm a lover of people, but the way I can love people after being here, you're going to create a monster, right? So on that end, even if a person is experiencing a great deal of activity and contrast in the environment, it provides an opportunity for growth and advancement like no other of self, right? So that's an opportunity that is provided. And that's the advice I would have for administrators, is that embrace the conditions as a way for continuing to develop oneself. And in knowing that that is a part of a curriculum, right? That can be, whether it's book club, book groups, et cetera. So the advice is that we don't learn, we don't just wake up, right? Well, maybe when we're children, we know, and then we forget. Who knows? There's theories on that, but we don't wake up knowing how to lead in different spaces or whatever. So administrators should either create that space for the folks that work with them and in their purview, or we're looking at it being, you can sometimes manage up or, I remember creating a book group on, it was like racial healing for social justice or something like that. I forget what it was. And it was like contemplative ways in which we can like heal ourselves. And then that, no one told me to do that, but I wanted to do that, right? And that also links to another suggestion or for administrators when it comes to like positivity. We're in the age of AI, technology, et cetera. There are, we've heard of fixed and growth mindset, right? And I used to do this thing on an course when I was teaching like a freshman seminar type thing, and it's a victim or creator mentality. The best thing we can do for ourselves and our people is to encourage a creator type of mentality versus a victim, because we are victims and can be victimized of so many things. And this is all the nuggets and ingredients of positivity. That creator mentality gives us the opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to look at this and see what opportunity and create. So that is another piece that we actually have. And with technology, being a creator is important like no other time in history, because we're going to be faced with challenges of learning fast, new, and you have to have that growth mindset to think that you can do it, right? First and foremost, but then second, you have to be a creator about how you can and create ways to find out how you learn best, whether that's from, a kind of a synchronous YouTube or asynchronous, or just doing it or jumping in, or person or resource. There is no time to not, because the gap every day, it used to be the gap every day was like this. Now the gap every day is like this every day. And before you know it, you can be in the whatever century, and another person 3 centuries ahead of you type of thing. So first, I start with that self-management in terms of the administrators, but then in creating spaces, and then the technology part. And I guess I would just, I guess I'll stop there as it relates to 2 like larger elements that I know can really apply to everyone. And maybe I'll touch on this before we. Politics is a really important. It's a thing, right?
It's a thing.
It's a thing. Now, I come from the training. I've done my 10,000 hours of crying, and there are more emotions to come. That through the way is through, right? Not avoiding it or around. One of my favorite books is well, that's another book, but the 4 Agreements. And there are 4 agreements that Don Miguel Ruiz talks about. And I really love it because it really does evidence. He talks about the Toltec tradition, but it does evidence some Eastern traditions. Like I've learned about the Ma'at, the 42 Declarations of Ma'at, and certain elements, and certain Eastern philosophies and Afrocentric based. But regardless of where it comes from, the first one is making sure to be impeccable with your word. So positive mentality thinking. And so impeccable with your word is you're only saying positive things about yourself, because your words to yourself can become curses, literally and figuratively, right? Regardless of what you believe. If you don't believe in that stuff, it's at least a negative thing about a person that can psychologically impact them or you at the moment, right? But there are some folks who believe in the vibrational energy of that, right? So the first one is impeccable with your words, so much so that you're not saying anything negative about yourself or other people. You can still call a fact a fact. And sometimes there are gossipy situations you can't get out of, but you only want to talk about people like they were in a room. So go ahead, have at it. But if they were in a room, that's a certain energy to be in, right? In terms of what we really needed from my experiences. I didn't only work at UDC, there's other places, all places. So that's first, impeccable with your word, making sure words do more construction than the second one. And is to make sure to not take anything personal. Now that's big, like Paul. So as you can see, these things, it's like training wheels for positivity. So you're not taking anything personally. Of course you can be positive, but this is when you are faced with anything, and this is a little bit of my background into this, but the book does it really. No one does anything just with you in mind. How egotistical to be. They do what they do, and you happen to be a receiver. Right? So sometimes it's like, this is just who they are. It may not make what they did okay. We're not saying that, but sometimes I literally am like, okay, that's not for me. But then I like literally address it. So I think not taking anything personal really does give you the ability to recognize everyone has their own story and their own walk. And it's not about you. It's about, no one can make you mad or make you even happy or anything. They can provide a stimulus for you to which to respond to that brings out the happiness or brings out the anger or what have you. Still doesn't mean people can't be really good, objects of affection or joy, or stimuli to get really upset and embrace those emotions and everything. But the compass is definitely in not taking it personally, because it's not you. Sorry, it's not you. So that's the second one. The third one is not making assumptions. And some of taking things personally is about making assumptions, right? Sometimes people are like, this is what they meant. If you don't know, you don't know. In our brains, we can't trust these reptilian brains, especially when you're in like the fight or flight mode, because it's filled with a bunch of junk that's programmed in you to actually, in some cases, get you to do something that's against your own will, right? Type of thing. You're at the refrigerator eating that thing or whatever. You're like, wait, how did I get to this place? So that's the other piece. And then the last one, and I could go drill more, but I know we have tons more to talk about, is just to do your best. Not saying I'm going to do lackluster work and be okay, but recognizing your capabilities and not beating yourself up afterwards, right? That's what I did. It was my best at that moment. Now, I had someone say to me before, they're like, how's that your best? We don't know. He could have done better than that. And I'm like, no, he or she, that was their best at that moment. And even if they knew they could do better, but they chose to do that, that was their best at that moment, you see? So accepting the is and not being, so those things, I don't want to go too much deeper. I do, you know, want to be mindful of your time. I appreciate the space to talk about those things.
I knew this was going to be great. Okay, so continuing on though with the drilling down, let's drill down some more or go to a different group. Let's look at faculty and student relationships. How does positivity enter into those relationships?
Yeah, and wow, it impacts in a great deal. So my research, Universal Design for Learning, I use that as a like a foil or a framework, what have you, for my dissertation. And the reason why I chose that is because many times when we were having conversations about, and I was at a, you know, PWI at Temple University, my dissertation, and I was working there as well at that time. When we talk about minority students or disenfranchised or minoritized or marginalized or whatever, there was a deficit-based lens, right? People didn't know that they had it, but my brain has always been kind of nuanced like that. I'm like, do you want to help? Or are you helping out of like, you feel bad for us? Like, you know, because I was one of those students. Is this like a savior thing? And it usually came from the fact that the relationship was a helper. Let me help you. Um, and I learned in one of my trainings somewhere, maybe it was my transformational social therapy kind of training. I think it was that one where it was so many hours of really, you don't necessarily help person unless they ask for it, right? It's even in counseling or, you know, there's certain advising you have to, but it's like you ask them questions and you see. So what frame with that, how we are approaching students, I found it to be all wrong, or not wrong, but not necessarily casting the widest net. So I think the best thing that we can do for learners is be curious about what their needs are and how they are as unique as a thumbprint. Now, their ways of showing up. Universal Design for Learning started with that. I use that versus some kind of other more race-based, because then I could use that as I've done to say, all right, now you know there's variation here if we're all green. Imagine that variation now that we add on these social identity factors over time that are having certain target groups that are disadvantaged because of context, et cetera. Because then you can understand the plight even more so. But if you don't start with the broader, you're just looking at it as like, oh, I'm like, no, any biological entity dealing with that would be. So for me, the engaging learners from a curiosity, being curious. And I think that for learners as well, being curious about themselves, because it's a two-way street. I encourage active learning big time for in faculty development or educational development, not because I just think it's the good trend and the research shows that there are greater gains, like the research that, what is it, HAKE 1998's work on the gains for a a group that's doing active learning are far greater than the most amazing class that people like, that there's no active, right? You have to be active. So for learners and faculty alike, but that shared accountability there, right? I have encouraged that although you are curious and believe in students, that belief in them actually gets them to do more. So there's no, you know, it gives them the space. But if you're doing it for them the whole time, it's a little different. So that's the other piece that I would recommend in terms of students and faculty members in the classroom.
Okay, awesome. So we're talking with Dr. Carl Moore, and we're going to have a part two. So I asked, what would you like to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, so just maybe I'll just leave really quickly covering the administrative leader piece and then the student piece. The best work you can do is on yourself. Carl believes in self mastery, not necessarily self-help. We know that some people don't like that part, but self-mastery is who are you uniquely, and being able to promote that in yourself and your staff across, and knowing that there's a collective genius that we can draw from when everyone has that. And that's the positivity in action versus it just being a word. In the classroom, that belief and that self-image that you have in yourself as a professor to be effective in all of your stuff beyond teaching, and that you instill in students, that stuff is contagious, right? And then in learners, the belief and the examples, and then the opportunities, right? To assess, to be assessed, or to have opportunity to show their genius in different ways that are multimodal. I used to do this thing, hip hop pedagogy, where I mean, I did come from, hip hop and things of that sort, but I was just using it because you have the 5 elements, like, that can really be good anchors for a person's creative expression, whether it's body, kinesthetic, or what have you. So I would just kind of offer those types of things to just say there's much more to learn when you are curious and when you're open and when you're seeing positivity as an opportunity and not as something that's just like to make everyone feel good because through is the way. So yeah, I didn't know if you had any other more concentrated questions. I know we just have about 5 more minutes or so left, but what did I not cover that I mean, and is there anything that you want to speak on? You're a great interviewer. You sit, you ask, you listen, but any thoughts, things that you want to double click on even yourself from what we've talked about thus far?
Well, before the interview, I mentioned to you that you give out really great resources, and you've given out several, but is there or are there a couple of more that you'd like to give us, resources on positivity that we can use or refer to?
Yes, and there are specific books on positivity, which I'll have to make sure to get to you. But these resources give you that where you can actually embody it and be it in action, which I really appreciate this opportunity. So it's not just a word. So I mentioned the book The Four Agreements,
Yes.
John Miguel Ruiz. There's another book that it's called Positive Intelligence. And people recommend a bunch of stuff. If I just recommend this and maybe only one more, then that's really saying, really get this. It provides you with the other side, and it's Positive Intelligence by Shazad Sharmin, where you also have what's working against that positivity, like one saboteurs, etc. And so much so that you can get a PQ assessment because you have emotional intelligence, and we know that IQ stuff is fine, but it only is a small part, and it's kind of like biased in how it measures intelligence. Emotional intelligence being like, okay, I can regulate my emotions, but you could still just have all emotions that are like not necessarily always positive. Positive intelligence is one's ability for your mind to work for you or against you, second to second. So I strongly recommend that book, the Positive Intelligence book. And there is a book called for educators, Teaching Naked. There's that book. There's a book on humanizing leadership that I recommend for administrators. You can just type the title. I don't remember the author for that. And then I'll have some stuff out soon that I can recommend. It's like, hey,
Awesome.
read this. Yeah, because I'm really big on I have this podcast on accessing ability, and I'll give you the link to that, where
Perfect.
it's really like we have different abilities to untap, to
Mhm.
tap into, and we just need to believe in ourselves. And another one coming up on universal like leadership, right? How are we humanizing within our own selves? So more to
Excellent.
come on that. You'll have all that, but I don't want to be self-promotional as much as just to say that this is the love and the passion, for the work.
Excellent.
And I want
Mhm.
to plug HFFA before we leave. I want to
Okay.
plug that,
Okay.
before we have our time.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Carl Moore, and we'll be back with more information about HFFA.